Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show of the INvets New Mission Mindset podcast. I am your host, Chaze Patrick, over in the Southern region. And so today I have a fantastic guest for you and a fellow veteran, Aubrey. Aubrey Williams is with a financial company,
Mhm.
and I will let her go ahead and do her introduction.
Yeah. So, hey, everybody. My name is Aubrey Williams. I am a certified financial planner with a major firm. I'm also the co founder of Heart Works Brewing, a local craft brewery here in Bloomington, Indiana. And I served 5 years active duty in the Army out of 3rd Infantry Division at Fort Stewart, Georgia.
Okay. So you're from the area initially, right? You were from Bloomington, did your time, and then came back,
Uh,
right?
I claim it as home. So I was talking to somebody yesterday. It's like I'm an Army brat. I'm married to a disabled veteran, and I'm a veteran myself. So I was born into active duty Army brat life. But when my dad transitioned from active duty and AGR to the reserves, we moved back to Indiana, and I was 10. So Bloomington, Indiana became home for me from age 10 to 18. I graduated here locally. And then I departed and I made my way back in 2020.
I did you decide to come back after your time in the service?
I would say that as a graduating high schooler in Indiana, I was real excited to get out of here. I think when you're young, you don't see everything that a place has to offer. And so my sister and I both ended up in New York for college. She went to civilian university. I went to West Point, and that's where I got my commission. But the longer I was away from home, the more home called me back. And I think that's exactly what happened in my dad's career too. He left in 74 and didn't come home until 95. Right. And so, um, by the time that I was considering coming back to Indiana, one of the biggest things that had changed is I'd become a mom. When we came here, I had a 2-year old and wanting to live closer to family, wanting to put down some real roots. And because even in corporate America, you can be PCSing everywhere with those jobs. I saw the opportunity to put down some roots both personally and professionally and transition to a career in finance.
Fantastic. So during your time in service, like what was like some of your favorite memories that you can recount?
Um, I think that some of the most memorable things for me happened during my deployments to Iraq. And I don't think there's just like singular events or things that stand out. It's just I'll describe it as just sort of a weird time to remember, whether it was like sitting on a camel in Kuwait or just kind of experiencing that different culture. One thing I remember about my year in Baghdad was there was an Iraqi worker who his son had been kidnapped and US forces returned his son to him.
Wow.
And he worked on our base and they got one day off a week that was sort of their Sabbath, and his wife would send him back to the base with home cooked Iraqi food every Friday. And so we would sit and break bread with this guy and eat this, whether stew or, lamb or whatever it was, not only to taste, their cuisine and get to know that culture, but also just to continue with that bond. And so I always remember Iraqi Food Friday is what we would do. And it was just a small group of, 6 or 8 of us who would break bread with him. And he was just continually grateful. And I think that really helped. If you're having a hard week or there were injuries or there was something bad that happened, you kind of came back to that sense of purpose.
That's fantastic. Um, how I guess really with your experience you mentioned that your dad was prior service too. Like how did those like values transcend as far as like your leadership capacity? I guess civilian and well, military and post military.
Yeah, I think that mentorship has certainly been a theme in my life, and my father is somebody that I look up to a lot, and people always say I followed in his footsteps. I followed in his footsteps as a cross country and track athlete, as a West Pointer into the Army, and now as a financial advisor. I mean, I always say that I haven't walked in his footsteps. I've walked beside his footsteps because every footfall was a decision of my own. But I do think that his mentorship and the values he instilled in me led me down that path. Um, that said, I think my most formative years as a leader were the 4 years I spent at West Point. It is, I still think, a premier leadership institution in our country. I think my lightest course load there was 19 credit hours for a semester. My highest one was over, I think, 22. And it was because it didn't matter if you were a French major or math major, you were taking philosophy, you were taking economics, you were taking literature, you were taking military leadership. They just pushed your brain in every direction that they could, and talks about ethics and talks about choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. And I think foundationally, the person that I am started with that formation with my father, but him being a West Pointer probably also meant that he was instilling some of those values in me as a child that he learned at the academy too.
That's fantastic. And like having those lessons, touch
Mhm.
generations. I mean, I'm not sure that means a lot, for him
Yeah.
to see your growth and obviously those lessons with what you're doing now in your life.
Mhm.
Funny thing you mentioned about West Point. I was at an event yesterday and
Yeah.
I ran into a West Point instructor.
Yeah.
Yeah, like out of nowhere. And I asked him, I said, do you still like keep in contact with people that, you went through, you took, through the academy? He's like, yeah, he follows them on social media, their journey and stuff. And yeah, he never would have known about because we have Crane down here and he's in the defense sector. He's like, man, you never know where life may take you.
So I have a good story about that West Point mentorship. Actually, it ties back to Indiana. So I stepped into my first American history class as a freshman at West Point, with this professor, and they make you go around and introduce yourself and say, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Bloomington, Indiana. And she looked at me, she said, did you go to North or South? And if you know about Bloomington, you know there's Bloomington North High School and Bloomington South High School. And so she had grandparents who lived in downtown Bloomington. And so as a child, she had spent time in Bloomington. So she knew if I said I was from Bloomington, I was probably one of those two schools. And we hit it off. And so her name's Jen Voigt's. She's currently the West Point historian, actually, now. But she was my history professor when I was 18. She became a mentor and sponsor of me. I ended up choosing to branch Adjutant General's Corps, which was also her branch. And so the day that I graduated and pinned on second lieutenant, I was given her second lieutenant shoulder boards for my uniform, and then continue full circle. We were never stationed in the same unit, but during my year-long tour in Baghdad, she was deployed to Baghdad. And so I got to go see her and meet up with her downrange, which was just a special treat for me to see that familiar face. And then as I left the service, she was one of the people who encouraged me to continue serving in nonprofit volunteer work to benefit and help veterans, because she had coordinated so many care packages to be sent to my unit through the Daughters of the American Revolution. And I'm now an active member of that organization too, because she led me there.
Wow. I see those strong connections between like the mentor piece and then like the servant leadership piece, which I feel is very strong with you and all the things you're involved in. So thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. So if I can recount something, did you jump out of a plane?
I'm a five jump chump. um,
Let's talk about
so
that.
you talk going back to West Point expanding your horizons and your pushing you in ways. Um, I'll never forget Major Roberts and Sergeant Connor. I had these great tactical officers and NCOs in my company. I am afraid of heights. I don't like to look out a balcony unless I'm back by the door. I don't like to sleep in the top bunk of a bed. Um, I can fly, I can ride roller coasters, but I just, again, if it means I could fall to my death, like I don't put me near it. So they thought it would be good for my development. Everybody at West Point has to do a military development school. And the one that they selected me for, even though there were two at the very bottom of my list, airborne school and air assault school, because those involved potentially falling to my death. And they sent me to airborne school. And I think I cried almost every day. I'm kind of ashamed to admit. And I was afraid. I mean, I was knee knocking, like knock on those little 30-foot towers, like knees knocking together, afraid of the zip line, like didn't want to do it. And something that I pushed through. Now, part of it was I knew that if I failed out of that school, that I would have to give up my spring break, my senior year of college, to redo some kind of training because I didn't pass the other piece of it is my father, who was airborne, said, well, gosh, Aubrey, if you make it through this, I'll come down to Georgia myself and pin your wings on. So now I had, my dad, who, as you mentioned, is my mentor, somebody I've looked up to, rooting for me and all that. And so I pushed through, I jumped, I did my 5 jumps. That first jump was a doozy because, they give you a roster number. I was Charlie 30 because I was a cadet. And you always go in order. So Charlie 29, or just 2 9s on one side of me and, 31s on the other. And as we're getting on that very first plane to jump, they smack me on the helmet and they're like, Charlie 30, get out of the line. And I'm like, oh no. I said some other words, but did I touch my parachute? Am I in trouble? Like, are they pulling me out? Like, I haven't even jumped yet. I've gone through 2 weeks of this hell to get here and they're pulling me out. So I ignored Sergeant Airborne and just kept getting on the plane and just didn't do it. And then they yelled at me again and said, now you get out. And I had to climb, at that point, I had to climb over all my buddies to get out because I'd ignored them. And they put me in the first seat by the door, which meant that they wanted me to jump first. And I later learned that's because they thought because I was so afraid that I could be a jump refusal and then it would mess up the line. So they needed me to, go out the door or decide I'm not doing it. And they needed me to go first. Back then I was like 100 pounds soaking wet. And I remember standing in front of that open door, watching the ground go by and shaking, knees knocking again. And it was one of those moments in life where you're like, what are you going to do, Aubrey? Like, this is it. And the green light came on and they smacked me on the butt. That's what they're supposed to do. They didn't. And I ran. I didn't just step off the plane. I ran. That's the only thing I knew to do. And I ran off their planes 5 times. Most of the time, probably with my eyes shut for a little bit, but I ran. And that was the thing people kind of laughed about. I had a hard time facing that fear. And it's an experience I'm so proud of now that I laugh about now. But one of the funny moments happened after graduation is that class was full of soldiers at Fort, that was then Fort Benning. And it was the infantry school, right? Like called Fort Benning School for Boys. And I had all these little boys, soldiers, like 18, 19 years old in that airborne class. And after graduation, a couple of them came up to me and they're like, ma'am, I really wanted to quit airborne school, but there was no way in hell I was quitting before you did because you were crying every day through that thing. And they were like, if she's sticking it out, I cannot wuss out. So there's a bunch of airborne infantrymen out there who did not quit airborne school because they couldn't quit before the weepy cadet who was afraid of planes.
Well, that's an excellent example, like showing courage and, really stretching yourself, and also showing from a leadership perspective that there is strength and vulnerability, right? Like, hey, like this is all me, Carl's, like I'm out here showing it, you know, I'm not a machine, right? Like, I know the military kind of wants you to be like the stone cold, do what you got to do, but really showing that, that humanistic piece as far as achieving something. I mean, that is very, very instrumental.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't my most shining moment, right? It was definitely one where people saw me be very vulnerable, but at the same time, it reminds me that there were a lot of things in the Army that I was really good at, and there were things that I was not. But I had colleagues, soldiers who were good at those things. And I think that it's so important to remember that so many of us can bring something different to the table and that those make us more mission capable. If everybody was uniform across the board, um, sure we'd meet a standard, but you've got to have, like, I want our biggest brains in cyber command and intelligence and those things like that. I want our strongest soldiers in those ranger regiments and all of that, regardless of who they are, where they came from. We want them there because we have strengths to bring to the table.
That is very touching, considering that yeah, I'm sure you heard about strengths-based leadership,
Yeah, I've
you
got
know.
strength finders on my shelf over there.
Yeah, so I was doing some searching, and I'm digressing, but I was looking at being a trainer through there, and I found that they have like different types of categories with leadership, managers, sales. I didn't know how that coupled into sales too, but those types of things that you mentioned, like having those strengths at the table, especially with the team dynamic, is so important, and especially with occupations, right? Because some people just naturally have it with certain jobs and things that need to be done. And sometimes there's also that transferability too, right? Like you can take your experiences and move, towards another scope.
No, I think that one thing I used to beat myself up about on my Army experience is that as a lieutenant, I didn't get that traditional platoon leader time. I think as an officer, everyone talks about platoon leader time, company commander time, and as you go on, battalion commander, it's those command positions. And I didn't get that. I was a staff officer, I was an S1, um, which was incredibly valuable experience, but I thought that lacking that platoon leader time or whatever um, made me less of a leader somehow. Then I get out to corporate America. I'm working for a large consumer goods company and realizing that cross functional leadership, AKA that whole staff situation that I was in the Army, was the perfect experience in parallel to take me to a corporate structure that's a bit more just cross functional, right? So, I mean, all of those meetings where I had the one, the two, the three, the four, the six, that's the same way it was when I got to corporate America. We had the supply person, the finance person, the marketing person, the salesperson, all of those roles. It was very similar. And learning to work with people who are from a different specialty all around the same mission, the Army had prepared me for that exquisitely. So I really transitioned to corporate America in that regard pretty easily with cross-functional leadership.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now we're going to transition because I believe you're also have done some entrepreneurial stuff too, right? Or currently doing that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So let's talk about that.
um, I would argue that I am not a natural entrepreneur or entrepreneurial by choice. I like a traditional job with a W-2 and benefits and all that. I mean, I'm a financial advisor. I like financial security. And so I've always thrived in kind of that big corporate structure, like I did at Mars, like at my current firm or the Army. But I married a craft beer brewer. So my husband, who's a disabled Army vet, he had worked for 8 years after he was medically separated as a craft beer brewer in various capacities on up to brewmaster. And when we moved home to Indiana, one of the things he said to me is like, I'm giving up my job here in Tennessee so we can follow your career, go to Indiana, be near your family. I really want a chance at this craft brewery. And so a few years ago, we started working with another family that I grew up with to, bring this to life. And now Heart Works Brewing has been open for 2 years. And in this era of, having a brick and mortar, something in the restaurant and bar business, it's never been easy. It's never going to be easy. But I'm really proud of what we do. We carry our personal values through into our business. We have a veterans discount 7 days a week. It's not just for Veterans Day. because of those principles and what we stand for. So I'm really proud that we've created a gathering space, a community space, a place that people come to celebrate, to network, to just have a really good beer and pizza.
Well, that's fantastic. I've been in the space myself, and I'm gonna tell you, I love it. It's very spacious. I say it's family friendly as well. I think you guys got a pool table and some arcade games in the back.
Yeah, shuffleboard. We got a shuffleboard, which
Shuffleboard.
is
Okay, okay.
yeah.
And then you got the back where you can like, I know you got the big TV and you got the tables in the back where you can have like smaller events and stuff like that, or actually bigger events too.
Yeah,
So
we do have that smaller private room, which I think has been really great. We have sometimes, on less busy days, like we'll kind of rent that to nonprofit groups, or people can have it for parties. But there's just not as many places now that you can again gather a group together like that without a really crazy high like food and beverage minimum or rental fee, convention kind of places. So yeah, it's been really positive. And also we're so close to the football stadium. We had an incredible run of watch parties for IU football, early 26. It's been a crazy ride, to do that and have that.
that's fantastic. Yeah. So check them out, everybody. Heart Works Brewing in Bloomington, veteran owned and operated, and also they do veterans discounts. So come on in, and it might possibly even host an event there too. Great space, great people, and great beer and
Thanks.
pizza. You guys do pizza too, right?
Yeah, we do pizza currently 5 days a week. This year we're hoping to do a kitchen like upgrade and expansion because it's been doing so great for us. So maybe more hours and days in the future, but the pizzas, the pizza's really good. It's Neapolitan style. I remember we had a bunch of IU students from their Italian club come in, and I was a little nervous about it, but they said it's as close as they can get to home in Bloomington.
What things would you say about your community makes it unique?
I think that Bloomington, if people are just judging a flyover state, or they're just judging Indiana based on what they think they know about it, right? Like it's been so interesting with IU football, how many people assumed that IU was in Indianapolis, and they're like, oh, Indy, Indy, Indy. It's like, no, no, no. Bloomington's a whole different place. The way that I would describe it to people is it is a culturally diverse, quirky, um, family friendly, kind of unique spot in Southern Indiana. I think we've got beautiful natural features from like our parks, hiking, quarries, lakes, all of that. There's a lot of outdoor recreation to be had. We're close to McCormick's Creek State Park. We are 30 minutes from Brown County State Park in Nashville. So like some really beautiful surroundings. And then you drop the university and that history on, this beautiful limestone campus, the events that come with that, festivals like Taste of Bloomington, 4th Street Arts Festival, the on-campus like Science Fest and other things like that. We've got like Wonder Lab Science Museums for kids, Museum for Kids, a world-class art museum. The auditorium brings Broadway tour shows to our town. And that's before I've even talked about the food. We've got international grocery stores, plural. We've got so many international restaurants, from Afghan cuisine to Tibetan to Korean to Japanese to Italian. And it's for a town of its size, it totally outkicks its coverage for all of the events and kind of the diversity and the spirit of what we have going on here. And it's by far my favorite place in Indiana.
That is fantastic. I really sense the diversity and the cultivation happening. I'll say anytime I go driving that town, like you can just feel the energy, you can feel just the amazing landscape that Bloomington has to offer. So I definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, so what are some things you would recommend to people that are in the service, like if they're transitioning, like what are some things they can do, to help better their journey or their situation?
Yeah. One of the things that I think they need to do is definitely work with some kind of mentor or partner to help you decode and prepare your resume. and also your talking points for interviews. Because I think in the military, we're coached to not take credit for our successes, but to take blame for things that go wrong. And so if you go into an interview and say, we did this, we did that, that's what the military trains us to do that. You need to take ownership of your experiences in that interview and say, I made this more efficient, and step out of those acronyms and translate those into the civilian space. Be able to articulate your value and your experience from there. Then kind of once you've got the job, one of the hard things for me to overcome was in the Army, your job was sort of 24/7. And so it was this in the civilian world. If somebody who reported to you ended up in jail, you would not be the person to go pick them up. Like if they had a personal problem and needed to go to anger management, you would not be the person escorting them there. But in the Army, it was this 24/7. And at the same time, that was sort of the negative side. The positive side of that 24/7 is you lived in a community that had your back, even after you walked out the unit door for the day. And so you knew that, like, gosh, my first deployment, I didn't have a ride to get dropped off, and I was solo at the time. And there was an Army wife that I knew through a Yahoo group who picked me up at 4 o'clock in the morning and dropped me off for my first deployment to Iraq. She barely knew me, but we knew we had people in common. And she's like, here's a 22-year-old woman about to deploy for the first time, no family down here, and needs somebody to drop her off and see her off. Same way I had friends who showed up to my welcome home ceremonies. It was like, there's no in corporate America, if you part well, then you'll leave with me, right? But once you leave the office for the day, barring a social happy hour, maybe everybody just goes back to their place. And so that was a hard thing emotionally, I think, for me to just understand that just because you get a job doesn't mean you get a built-in community with that.
I have a funny story. I was a young Marine, and I was flying back from Tampa. I was going from Florida back to North Carolina in '96. There was an issue like with me getting back. Once I got back to North Carolina, I think I flew into like Raleigh or something. Um, my ride, I didn't have a ride. And there was a gentleman, and he was I didn't realize who he was until like after, because he was in civic clothes, and he was a major in the Air Force, and he was like, "Hey, like I'm going that way anyway. I'll just drop you off on base and keep on going." But it's like one of those things in the military community, like we try to look out for each other and try to do the best we can. And I'll be honest with you, it's still hard for me to kind of turn the switch off because when you're running like that, and the military trains you to kind of constantly be thinking. And so personally and professionally, right? So it's like one of those things where it's a strength, a growth area as well.
I can totally see that. I think that it's there's all these quirky little funny stories like where I didn't realize what the transition was like. I guess like one example would be my very first corporate business trip. So I had traveled TDY with the Army, and I remember they'd put you up at the Red Roof Inn, and you might have a roommate, and you got like $5 a day to eat. No, I'm exaggerating, but it's like that. And I was going on my first like corporate meeting at Walmart headquarters. So we're going to Arkansas, and we're planning this trip. I'm booking it through the corporate travel. But before I book it, I'm like, oh gosh, I don't really know anybody yet. So I turned to my friend Gilda. I said, Gilda, who am I supposed to room with on this trip? And she looked at me like I had a horn growing out of my head, like, what do you mean room with? And I was like, oh, well, where I came from before, you'd have like a same gender roommate if you're traveling for corporate travel or whatever. And she was like, no, you get your own room, honey. Like, and I'm like, okay. And then I'm at the airport with her, and I'm about to get like a Starbucks like latte, and I'm about to pay. She looks at me and she's like, why aren't you using your corporate card? I was like, because it's Starbucks. Like, that's not a necessity. And she was like, it's your breakfast. Like, get the corporate card out. And so it was like, we weren't going crazy on the corporate card, but I was surprised, like, the extras that were included, it was definitely a step above your traditional TDY, but a little embarrassing for me, asking my corporate counterpart, like, who's my roommate for the company trip?
So, do you have anything you would like to close out with today? And
You
go
know,
IU, of course. And I guess to ask about because you went to that national championship in Miami, didn't you?
as I am still riding that euphoria of that. I wept openly when Indiana won the national championship. One of the special things about coming home to Bloomington, I didn't even mention this. I mentioned the arts and stuff like that, but we've got sports. And so going to IU sports has been something that I've been doing with my dad a whole lot. And so we decided we had tickets through the Indiana's allocation because he's been a season ticket holder for over 20 years for football. So he's been there through the thick and thin. And we got tickets and we went down to the game, and it was an incredible experience. It was really cool to see the Hoosier Nation be like 70% of that stadium was in red. I mean, it was incredible.
You can
Bumping
see from the
into
TV, it was all like mostly it was mostly red.
I mean, I was running into people who live here in Bloomington, and like, there's my sorority sister there. There's my friend there. Our neighbors were there, but then also people from all over the country. And so, it really highlights the importance, honestly, of your network, though, because one thing that I chose to do after I got out of the Army is I got my MBA and a master's at Indiana University and the Kelley School of Business. And Indiana's got the largest living alumni network, I think, in the world. There's 800,000 living alumni. And so I guarantee you there's not a state in the US and in probably most countries where you can't find an IU grad. And so if you're going to pursue additional schooling after you leave the service, definitely look. The strength of that network and that alumni network is really important. And IU has some great programs for veterans. I know a lot of them have done their MBA remotely through Kelley Direct, just to be able to take that with them as they move from place to place and get a world-class degree. Now, when I think about what kind of parting words I would leave for INvets, the first one I would say is, find your battle buddy. We're not trained to ask for help, but we all know the importance of a good battle buddy. And so if it's reaching out to someone at INvets for help, if you're sitting there just banging your head up against the wall, you need a battle buddy in this journey. And veterans who have been there are more than willing to stand in the gap and get that for you. So the first one would really be to have that battle buddy. The second thing I would leave you with is, I think this Bloomington area in Indiana, it's a fantastic place to come after you leave that service. I do think there are a lot of, like Bloomington, I think it's the largest American Legion by membership in the state of Indiana. The American Legion is headquartered in Indianapolis. We have a very strong veteran presence in this state, and I do think people value that. And so with Crane, again, one of the largest naval surface warfare centers, I think, in the world, right here, I would say come to Bloomington, check it out, have a beer, of course. But I think it's a fantastic community. Our public schools are fantastic. So if you're looking for a place to land, I think this should be someplace that you consider.
That was a fantastic closing. And I also want to add, they are paying people to move to Bloomington through the Choose Southern Indiana relocation program too. So if you come to Bloomington and want to live here, I believe you get like $5,000.
Yeah, they're really pushing. If you're a remote worker and you want a place like, Bloomington in the context of Indiana is a little more expensive cost of living, but in the context of the US is not expensive. And so I know there's a lot of remote workers. We have this big rails to trail system. They're always jogging, walking, cycling. Cycling's really big here. There's a lot of people who work in tech, who work in medical fields and manufacturing. A lot of opportunity there. But I do think personally, like if you live in Bloomington and you're bored or hungry, you're not even trying, because there's so much to do. There's some of the best food in the state. I think it's out there. If you're sitting at home on your laurels saying, I don't like Bloomington, then I think that you're not trying very hard, because there's a lot to love. And we're such a great day trip away. Like we're doing a family, just a quick trip, family weekend trip to Louisville. We've done Cincinnati, Columbus, Chicago, St. Louis, Nashville. I mean, there's so many places within about a 4 hour, 4.5 hour drive that you can go to for a weekend, that you could do a day trip. We just did a day trip up to Indy for the Children's Museum in Indianapolis. I think it's the largest in the world by square footage. And it's a place that they have a military discount there as well. They have both they gave me both the Indiana residence discount, then add the military discount. So
That's awesome. So you're a perfect spokesperson for like Indiana. You should like really think about that as like an ambassador. Who's your veteran ambassador?
I'll be honest with you, Chaz, like I got a lot of grief because I was living in the Nashville, Tennessee area, right? Hot spot in the country. And when I resigned from my corporate job and told all my coworkers I'm moving to Indiana, they were like, what, why? Like they just think it's a cornfield. And I'm like, that's what we want you to think. So you don't come here and, take over. But I sent out change of address form cards, like little Christmas cards to my friends. And that's when I knew that everybody had like Googled my address, because everyone was texting me, you bought a house for how much? Because compared to what they were in Nashville, the prices here were like literally half the price. And so I think what I've realized, and I've told people, is I live 45 minutes away from an award-winning airport that can take me anywhere I want to go. And by keeping my cost of living lower by choosing to be here in Indiana, I can go to Italy for a week. I can go on a trip to, see my sister in Arizona, and then come home to a place that, gives me a really great quality of life, and without the cost to stress me out.
Those are some great points. And then I think also, I think this has happened in a few years, but Indiana doesn't tax military retirement. And then I also believe that if you're wearing a uniform right now and in Indiana, there's no, or if you claim Indiana with your residency, there's no tax. You don't get any state tax taken out. So
You
that's
get
more money in your pocket.
Yep, there's another. I know that for our house, there's like a tax benefit too on our home. I think we apply for, and then Bloomington just got a brand new VA clinic. Like they just cut the ribbon like in the last year. So, yeah, we've got a lot of. My dad and my husband both use VA healthcare 100%. So, I just think that it's one of the best decisions I ever made now 6 years ago, was to come home to Indiana. And I can tell you that this is, really the last place I intend to live. Like, this is it. I've really been able to put down roots. And for somebody who was born into that nomadic army lifestyle, it feels really, really good.
Well, Aubrey, I want to take a moment to thank you so much for sharing your story, your insights, and thank you for your service too.
Thanks for having me, Chaz.
Of course, and everybody follow her on LinkedIn. She's very active in the community, definitely a community servant and leader. And so, thank you for joining us. Until next time, catch the next INvets, next mission mindset. Talk to you later. Take care.
INvets is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to helping transitioning service members and their families find great careers and communities here in Indiana.
The way we usually connect with veterans is in-person events. They are assigned to a case manager, which is one of the 5 veteran engagement managers who are located in 5 regions around Indiana. They'll really work hard to connect with them. And then they complete the profile in more detail about the types of careers they want, the skills they have, where they might live, do they have a spouse. So it's a very personal service. And we try to match them with the right career, and we try to match them with the right community.
We take our job seriously, understanding that we're not selling somebody a thing, we're helping somebody move into the next phase of their life. That's not lost on us.
We are not moving one person, we're moving a whole family, and every member of that family has a different need. We try to have those open discussions about everything.
So what we realized was just helping somebody find a job when they get out of the military isn't enough. There's got to be more to it than that, especially if we want to create lifelong Hoosiers. So we started thinking about what can we do outside of helping people find great careers to get them connected to their community. Transition is not transactional, it's transformational. And it's something that we talk with our staff about all the time. We cannot look at transition out of the military as a transaction of leaving one job and going to another. It's a transformational moment in somebody's life, and we hope and believe that should be Indiana. And once they're here, we remind them that we're here for life. So if there's anything that you need once you've gotten here, you're looking for a volunteer opportunity, a way to get involved in your community, or you just need some resources.
A thriving job market and low cost of living, plus a wide range of veteran benefits, make Indiana the perfect place for veterans of the United States military to call home. INvets can help you find that home. We're an organization started by veterans to help former service members transition to civilian life in our state. INvets can help you find the community with the career opportunities, housing, schools, and amenities that fit your lifestyle. To learn more about INvets, visit us at invets.org today.